Hi, this is Mrs. Perry Eising with a tutorial for Deer Park High School's multimedia class. In this tutorial, I'll talk about how to navigate through the Final Cut Pro 10 interface. So, taking a look at our interface in a clockwise fashion, let's go over each section of the screen. Our first section over here on the left is called the Sidebar, and that's where you see a listing of what's included in your project. So in this case, in this project, we have a library called Period 9. So that's where we start with everybody who's in my Period 9 class. Then we have an event called the Bone Marrow Drive, which is where we store the media or the video clips for the Bone Marrow Drive that we had covered a few years ago. And then looking over to the next screen, this is called your browser. So in my browser, it's showing me that I have one project started called Interviews. It's showing me all of the clips I have available to me that I have imported. And now, once I start going through all of this, I can, make selections in each section of the screen. So at this point, I've imported all of my clips. So looking at my sidebar, I really don't need this list here anymore, and it's taking up real estate on my screen. So if I want to toggle that off, I'm going to hit this icon right here, and that's going to turn the sidebar off. If I was to hit it again, it turns it back on. So being I don't need it, I'm going to shut it off just to give myself more screen real estate. If I wanted to ever go back to my original setup of the windows, I can hit Command and the number 0, and that brings all of my windows on my screen back to their default positions. So I get used to using that sometimes. So I'm going to turn that off for now. Now, taking a look at my browser, these are all of the clips that I imported into my project. And so if I look at this section right here on the top right-hand side of my browser, I have choices of how I would like these clips to be displayed. So for example, right now they're displayed as thumbnails. If I didn't want them displayed as thumbnails and I'd like to see it in the list view, maybe by clip name, if I click this icon right here, this gives me a list view in alphabetical order usually, yeah. I can toggle and put that back into the thumbnail view. As far as my thumbnails go, I can change the appearance of them. So for example, if I hit this icon right here, I can say make my thumbnails bigger or smaller, and I can show how much of a thumbnail is displayed by second. So right now my thumbnails are going to display on my clips every 30 seconds. If I was to go like this and drag it over to like 5 seconds, then you see I have different thumbnails every 5 seconds. So it's just a matter of preference how you like to work. So I'm going to put that back to 30 seconds, which is the default. Okay, that's the way I like to look at it. So those are just a couple of tips on getting used to your screen real estate. In the middle section right here with the video showing, that's called my viewer. That just shows me whatever I'm working on. I can play around with this right here. How would I like this to appear? Would I like to see 100% of the video? It's really big and zoomed in then. Or would I just like to fit it all to my viewer? I prefer that. On my right here, this is called my inspector. So what an inspector does is, as I'm working on something, if I wanted, like for example, if I click on my clip in the timeline, over here, this would give me all sorts of options of what I could do with that clip. So your inspector, if you're going to be making adjustments to your clips, you can have your inspector open. If you did not want your inspector open, if I come to this icon right up here in the top right, that takes the inspector off. It's not that it's not there, it's still there, it's just not showing right now so that I can just have, again, more screen real estate, or I could put it back on. Coming down to the timeline over here, this is obviously where you're going to have your clips and where you're going to build your story. Now, how do you like those clips to appear? You can change the appearance of those, and it's just preference. So if I click on this icon right over here on the right, this is going to allow me to change the view of my clips. So for example, right now my clips are showing part video, part audio. If I wanted to show more audio, I might want to click on this, and so the video looks like it's shrinking in the thumbnail here, and then the audio portion of it gets bigger. So if I wanted to focus on the audio, I might do that. I might go the opposite end, and I might make the video clip bigger over here and the audio smaller, depending on what I want to focus on. I can basically take out the audio. The audio is still there. It's still in the video. It's just not showing because it's just a preference of how I want to work. I could do the opposite on the opposite end of that list. So I'm just going to stick with the default, which is this one here. If I wanted to say, for example, make my video clips bigger in terms of height, I can play with this slider here. If I wanted to zoom in on them, I can play with this slider here. you're not changing anything in terms of did you add or take away from the clip. No. All you're doing is changing the appearance to get it to be how you like it, to your liking. So that's the beginning of working with Final Cut, is just to understand the interface. Once again, I'm going to hit Command and 0, and that's going to bring all my windows back to the default. So just to review, this is your sidebar. It's a list of what you have going on in your project, whether it be events, projects, library. This section right here is your browser, and that's going to show you your projects and your media. In this case, it's video clips. This section right here is my viewer. That's where I see what I'm working on. This section over here is my inspector. That allows me to play with options on each of the things that I want to do within my project. And down here, this is your timeline. And in your timeline, you can play around with your view by clicking this icon right over here. So that's about just it for an intro to how to navigate the workspace or the interface in Final Cut Pro 10. It's just a place to get started. Okay, I'll catch you on the next tutorial where I'll show you how to make basic edits.